a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are. And like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia, and this is Free Range, where we graze on wild ideas, and we have wonderful guests. And my wonderful guest today is Frank Jacob, and I am so anxious to hear about his latest research and findings, because he's always ahead of everybody else, in my opinion. But anyway, let me bring him on. Welcome, Frank.
Hello, Gail.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm good. How are you? Thank you.
I'm good too, thank you. And I'm anxious to hear about your time capsule and your some of the things that were mentioned in the new webinar that you have. And where should we start? One of the questions I asked in the title, I don't know if you noticed, was, is our planet a living being? Would it be okay to start there, or is that too much too fast?
Oh, sure. Why not? Actually, that's kind of where the webinar starts. Because just to give you a little backstory, I was looking for a subject, and of the last couple of years, I've been delving deeply into history, the true history on the planet, and particularly with respect to the 20th century and those world wars, those two world wars, because I'm an expat who left, North America and came over to Germany, where, the evil Nazis basically came from. I somehow got, eventually I was destined to collide with exploring the truth or the full story, let's say, of that narrative. And having gotten into the fringe science and paranormal fields with films like Packing for Mars and Klaus Dona Chronicles and Solar Revolution, I built up kind of a network and a reputation, and people began to approach me here with information that of course contradicted the official narrative. So that's how it starts, and you end up going down this rabbit hole, and it's such a touchy subject. Well, for me, there was this clincher that I got my hands on, documentation that laid it out very clearly what was going on during the whole preceding time, between those two wars. And that document is like explosive, right? So I was thinking, I've got to do this. I've got to get this out there. It's really gnarly, and I love poking, the wasp's nest for the right reasons.
Oh, definitely. And you know what? It's interesting that you're bringing this up, because Mike King is another one who's looked into the history. They wanted to take out Germany and Japan.
Oh, yeah. Well, so of Mike King. Well, of course, I've had Mike King on my radar too for years, and I've been getting his posts and things. And he's a character, got to say. But yeah, he's one of them. And eventually what happened is that I was trying to figure out, look, I'd like to get this story out, but the problem is this: I just don't want to, approach it with the same old, there's the good guys, the bad guys, and then this is the true story. I wanted to find out, what is it that, where did this all originate? There's got to be some kind of a underlying motivational force that set things in this direction, that there would be these two opposing forces that were, hell bent on just taking each other out, essentially. And find out, where does this come from? There's got to be more to it than just some racist slanders and anti-Semitic, whatever attitudes. So that led me by total fluke, into a subject called comparative mythology. And the way I found out about comparative mythology was in itself kind of an indirect way, because about a year ago, there was a lot of talk about this idea that the world is all a simulation, and that a lot of people have been getting into this discussion about everything is just a simulation. And I've obviously I'm no stranger to that subject myself, but I remember seeing this video of someone, and then I remember, like, what was that guy's name again? And I went through my thing, and oh yeah, there's this guy called John Lash, and I listened to that video, and I got this nagging voice to go back there and find out not just that video, but I thought the guy's points were so damn interesting that I had to find out more about who he is. And it was very hard to find the information of, except I found he had a channel, and I started to check out his other videos, and I realized, whoa, lo and behold, he's a comparative mythologist, and there aren't a lot of them left on the planet. Joseph Campbell was one of the most famous ones that people might know who are listening. And he's no longer on the planet, but actually a lot of people consider John Lash to be his successor, unofficial, because John Lash is not you wouldn't say academic scholar. He hasn't gone the university route, but he's a scholar nonetheless, because he does the same work. He just doesn't fit into the nicely into the drawers of the academia, which always tends to be like everything else, mainstream or nothing, right? You either follow the dialogue that we've set up for you to explore, and this is your toy box, this is your sandbox.
Even the curriculum of anything you might be teaching, they tell you this is your
sandbox, and you get to play in the sandbox, and it's pretty big. It's big enough for you. Okay, so just play in that and be happy in the sandbox, right? Well, John wasn't one of those guys that is happy in the sandbox, and that's kind of like me too. So I just got so enthralled with the breadth of knowledge, and I realized the guy's got about 40-50 years of research behind him. And I got in touch with him. I said, look, I want to talk to you about this subject, and it turns out we hit it off, and I knew I had to incorporate some of his work in the time capsule, and because I think it's critical to make it clear to people what the bigger 40,000 foot perspective is on these underlying currents in our society, which have never let go, because there always seems to be another war brewing, another discontented group of people. There's always this just never ending loop. Well, as it turns out, it has a direct relationship to where I was going with my World War II narrative. But I had to take a step back, because I was like, okay, well, if I want to bring people into this material, which essentially is you could say under the term of Gnosticism. The first problem I encountered is that I realized that there's a lot of Gnosticism out there, but it isn't the same kind of Gnosticism that this John Lash was talking about.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because Gnosticism has been put into a sandbox as well. And that sandbox has to do with the standard traditional Judeo-Christian Abrahamic religious, concept. And it's always like, because Gnosticism was born out of documents that were discovered in 1945 in a place called Nag Hammadi, which gives it their name. And they're called the Nag Hammadi Library. It's a book of it's the oldest bound collection of bound books on our planet. Okay, and it was found about between 300-400 years after the new era started, and it talks about material that goes back thousands of years. And you realize that the people that captured that information, it was like, if you get, there's a good analogy about it. Like you could say it's all fractured information. There's little bits, and you can find, things that belong into the early biblical books. But it's like finding a pile of Legos. And the people who are of the Judeo-Christian mindset, they're going to pull out the Legos they find that recognize and fit into what they believe. Yeah, and the people who are into another belief system, they're going to pull out the little Legos and construct a thing that works with their belief system. And the thing I like about John Lash is that he's the only guy that kind of looked at it neutrally as what they were. He's trying to figure out, well, what wasn't it? What was it not? It wasn't part of these. And lo and behold, that's where the real full story comes out. And part of that story has to do with the creation. You find out that there's a whole creation narrative which has nothing to do with the creation narrative in the Old Testament, with Yahweh, the Elohim, and all these angels, the fallen angel, Lucifer, all this stuff, right? That whole story, turns out, has a counterpart, a preceding narrative, and that narrative is, some people
Oh,
call it
wow.
the story. And John basically went through that material and pieced it back together again. And it's basically 9 episodes. And it's a story that is under the title of The Fallen Goddess Scenario. And it's an amazing story. And I was fascinated by the story, and I started to take this in, and I was feeling this story like I've never felt anything before. It felt real. It felt
so it was
tangible.
really resonating with you.
It was resonating, right? So,
yeah.
But the story in a nutshell is that, there's this being, and her name is Sophia, and it's, and it's funny. Another name for her is Gaia Sophia.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't
And
know
the reason
that. That's
why is
interesting.
because Gaia Sophia is a word that has to do with the idea. Gaia is the idea that came out of a proposition brought forward by a chemist called James Lovelock in 78, 77, maybe something like that, in that area, called the Gaia hypothesis, or the Gaia paradigm. And that says that essentially the Earth is a living being.
Yeah.
And it behaves like a living being. It's it's a single living organism. It's been evolving over the last few billions of years. It's self-evolving, it's self-regulating, it's self-sustaining, and basically, it's we're riding within a biosphere of this living organism. And amazingly, these Gnostic teachers who go back 6,000 years, they knew this, and they documented the actual story and how it came about. How did this being Sophia, how is she the planet? It turns out that Sophia turned herself into the planet, and that what led to her turning into the planet is just a mind-blowing story. And it seems almost like science fiction at first. And a lot of these Gnostic, writings, when you look at them on that level, they could be adult science fiction fantasy books. But the thing is, they weren't. These guys were serious. Well, there's another acronym that fits them really well: Planetary Intelligence Agency. Yeah, they were the people that were like us. They were the researchers and the shamans and the people that were interested in knowing the truth. And Gnostics, of course, the word Gnosticism contained in that word is it's truth, right? The truth, not belief, right? And mainly like spiritual truth. So, I had to start, of course, with, if I'm going to explain what is Gnosticism and what is the real Gnosticism and not the sort of pseudo Gnosticism. And I had to kind of, and then while I was digesting all this material, I was on a road trip with Tanya Maidenford through the States, where we made some stops. I think we interviewed Brad Olson about the Giants. We were up in Idaho. We drove down past Area 51, had a kind of a camp out there, and ended up in Palm Springs to debut one of our new, our sneak preview of a new film we're working on. So during that trip, I was reading this Fallen Goddess Scenario, and Tanya said, I said, I've been getting these downloads, especially one that I got in Area 51. I said, I think I need to weave this story into the webinar for this story to be woven into the greater story would be amazing. And Tanya right away said, yeah, and I'm going to be the voice. And I'm like, yes, you are going to be the voice. So that's kind of how the idea was born. So we've woven that entire narrative of the Fallen Goddess Scenario into this webinar. And the first part, of course, is describing, well, what is Sophia? Where did Sophia come from? How did she turn into the planet and all this stuff? So this story in itself has something to do with, believe it or not, the new emerging science in the world called plasma science, plasma universe, right? It doesn't make sense if you think about it. Well, okay, there's this God in the center of the universe. It just sounds like another creation story, right? But we'll put over top of it now the new emerging science, 2 branches of it. One of it is called electric universe, and the other is called, well, the plasma universe, that everything is plasma. And in fact, they've determined pretty much that 99.9% of the universe is plasma. We only see a small percentage of it with our visible spectrum being so narrow with our eyes, but there's dark plasma, there's glowing plasma, and there's blazing plasma. And so, this, you find out that there's this guy called Robert Temple who's done amazing research on it. And Temple's research essentially Temple's an author that is amazing at summarizing the findings in plasma universe and electric universe concepts. And as it turns out, plasma is conscious. It has consciousness, right? And there's this Russian researcher called Vadim Tsitovich, who, or Tsaitovich or whatever, I don't know how to pronounce it, but he had a lab in Russia. He's no longer with us, but he was one of the foremost plasma researchers on the planet. And before he left the planet, he did an he proved in his laboratory that plasma acted like self-organizing, highly energetic, super artificial intelligence. It became intelligence in the laboratory.
Wow.
Right. So it doesn't take much of an extrapolation to kind of project that, well, if a little teeny thing in the lab is intelligent and everything is plasma, then the planet is intelligent, the solar system, the galaxy, the entire universe is conscious because all of it is made of plasma. And as it turns out, Robert Temple has a beautiful picture in his book about the side-by-side view of the neural network of the human brain shot next to infrared spectroscopy pictures of the universe, showing essentially an identical structure. So here we have the basis of microcosm and macrocosm. And we know that when there's microcosm, macrocosm relationships, it's a clear evidence that it's a fractal structure. And as we're finding out, yes, the entire universe tends to be fractal. And so here we are. The foundation of the Sophianic narrative is that she's a plasmic conscious torrent at the center of the galaxy, where essentially the home is of, you could say, are the gods, like the plasmic gods. And they're not like anthroposophic. They don't look like humans, men with beard or anything like that. They are literally serpentine currents that have consciousness, and they flow in this area called the pleroma. And all the space out there that we see that's dark, that everyone tries to explain as dark energy or dark matter. Well, those dark matter and dark energy theories are totally debunkable. It turns out there's never been anything found that can prove them. In fact, the longer they search, the longer they research, the less evidence they found. But if you realize that it's plasma, it's just dark plasma. It's an invisible state, right? So bingo, it's okay. We can just accept it. Everything is plasma. Some of it we see, some of it we don't see, and some of it is glowing and it's creating energy. And it's like, a battery network running through the entire universe. And at the center of these galaxies are these specific focal points. And that's where these pleromic beings and the Gnostics of, the Telestai, as they really called themselves thousands of years ago, they called them aeons. They were the aeonic beings that essentially they would receive impulses from an originator energy, which you could say is the original God energy or whatever. And that would be, this energy always existed. There was no Big Bang. All this stuff is all just like mathematical creation in a lot of ways. And so, if you understand that there's this originator energy which sends impulses out, just like, you send impulses out in your brain, or like we all have, imaginative impulses, and we get ideas, and this is no different on a macro scale. And these impulses are received and caught by these aeons, and the aeons convert them and into experiments. Like in some cases, like in our case, an experiment called the Anthropos. They designed the human DNA, nucleic acid, and they gave it they were endowed it with certain faculties. And they release it out of the pleroma into what they call the DEMA, the dense electrical magnetic matter area. Everything out there is, essentially dust. And when dust connects with these pulses of energy, it begins to form into something. And that's how you that's how you get planets and all these things that are born. So essentially, here is the model for the fallen goddess scenario, that essentially the human experiment was put out there and into our Milky Way galaxy. And here's where it gets kind of cool. Are you still with me?
Oh yeah, that's fascinating. Is that aeons? Eons? Is that the one that's AEONS?
Yes.
Is that
aeons,
okay? And those are streams of consciousness.
And because because there's only two laws in the universe: novelty and free will. That's it. There are no rules. There's no noetic, laws or 10 commandments or whatever. It's like, this is all man-made, or there's another aspect to the story I'll get to in a minute, which is not man-made. But essentially, there are these impulses, and these impulses create these experiments, and the experiments, are carried out. And in the case of the Anthropos, according to the intel in the Nag Hammadi writings now from 4,000 years ago, you got to get this through your mind. These guys were not loincloth wearing, club wielding, Flintstone guys. They were highly intellectual pagan, cultures that had built like Stonehenge, pyramids. We're talking things we don't even know anymore. We've lost them because they burned the Library of Alexandria, which is where they collected a lot of that information for thousands and thousands of years. Maps, artifacts, stories. You can imagine what's all been lost, right? But anyway,
Was that possibly kept in the Vatican basement?
Well, we know that there's a good possibility that a large portion of it is being kept in the Vatican. But there's that legend of the burning down of the Library of Alexandria, etc. Right? So essentially, these guys figured out that that this being they're always male and female components. These torrents, they have personalities and they have gender, and they created this anthropine species, and they released it. But they released it, and there was a failure in the experiment about 9 times. It kept shipwrecking. Essentially, it would get into a habitat, would start, and then it would die. It would just self-destruct. And Sophia, being the feminine energy, she became literally so passionate and so over enthusiastic and so obsessed with wanting to see it come like to its fruition. It was like she wanted to see it succeed. So she eventually, what happened is, in a long story short, is she plunged out of the center, the pleroma, and she went into the matter area of the third arm of the Milky Way galaxy, figuring she would, I guess she probably didn't think too much about what would happen, but nobody had ever done that. She went into the third arm and she slammed into the dust particles, the leftover remnants, the stuff that we find out there when we look through Hubble telescopes, all these little leftover particles and remnants of previous planetary systems, dust particles, all this stuff from, all of eternity, essentially. And she collided with that material. And in the course of doing that, there was an aberrant species which was created as a result of her rubbing off of her energetic body onto these particles some of her inherent plan, some of her inherent ideas and energies. And that, what emerged out of that was something called archons. So now you have her, this being, this plasma being, in the middle of this matter, learning how to navigate matter, surrounded by these archontic energies, which are in a way like locust-like, and they weren't intended. So the first problem she has is how to deal with these archons. And this is all embedded. The crazy part is this is all written down in the Gnostic material in Nag Hammadi, okay? I'm not making this up, and neither is John, right? So I'm just, I'm just summarizing it for you here, just to make it short. And long story short is that Sophia, in the course of the time scale that, of course, these beings are on, is much greater than ours. I think a day of our life is 26,000 years is a day in their life. So to give you an idea of time scales, although it correlates, is like one day of their lives is 26,000 years of our lives, right? So
wow.
In her life of like, a couple of years of getting it together, a solar system was formed, a sun was pulled in, and eventually she knew the only way that she could ensure the success of the Anthropos was to provide a habitat for that Anthropos. And she did that by essentially assembling all of these elementary particles and matter around her into the planet, and she morphed into planet Earth, where she basically has been since then, essentially now moving into a phase of dreaming, like you could say dream trance state, of pulling, from being a plasmic, aeonic, godlike divinity into a clump of dirt, literally, and having to breed out of her the Anthropos and set all of it in motion. And this has been going on for millions of years. And all these stages, the Cambrian explosion, all these things that we have, these are all part of her aeonic exploration of realizing the anthropic genome, making it happen. And so, yeah, that's how the story of the Earth actually being a being has its origins in the earliest records that we know of. So it's very interesting how Gaia theory emerged in the late 70s. And it was interesting if you look at correlations too, and then I'll stop talking. You know, things are always seem to be correlated in certain batches. Like within a year or two, a chunk of information comes out that seems to all be coincidental, but it's all related. Well, at the end of the 70s, what happened is that the Nag Hammadi library was first translated into English. So literally for 30 years, it had lain dormant. And so suddenly it appears, and essentially we find out through the English translation of the Nag Hammadi that there is a Gaia story embedded right in that material, except it goes back thousands of years.
That's fascinating. You know, I knew there's something about Gaia, but I hadn't done that research to get the information that you're putting out there. I'm going to have to read that book because I've always wondered. I haven't done the research on the. I've heard her called Sophia, and you call her Sophia.
Right.
So, okay, I don't know if there's one way or another matters, but that is absolutely fascinating. But it totally runs into the religious dogma.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I see a guy in the chat saying the Secret Gospel of John talks about Sophia and her irresponsible creation of the archons. Yes, but you got to realize that there's something called the Valentinian clue, and there's there's like there isn't just one branch of Gnosticism. This Valentinian branch, there was this Gnostic who tried to conform to the early Christians that were emerging at the 2,000 years ago at that point, because essentially Gnostics were at one point eradicated. Like they were pushed out because their philosophies were totally against salvationism, totally against redemption, totally against this whole narrative that the Abrahamic religions were putting out there. And when they started to come forward and talk about that, they were literally ostracized and murdered. In fact, their books were taken, they were murdered, and there were some of them that tried to probably save their butts, and the Valentinian aspect of it emerged in this level. So there were some contortions of the actual pure narrative of the Sophianic story, which have emerged now, and a lot of people are misled to believe that it was a mistake, that and that Sophia went against the creator and that she was punished for it, and all these things. These are all themes that emerged in the Abrahamic religions, but there was no punishing God in the original source material that we found out about from the Gnostics, from the true Gnostics. There is no such thing as some righteous being who punishes, who has laws. There is only novelty and free will. And the aeons, there's nothing wrong with an aeon jumping out of the pleroma into the Dema. It isn't in the protocol, okay? She broke with protocol, but because there's novelty, it's like, all right, she broke protocol, let's check it out, right? And that's literally what happened. And so a lot of also false information about the Gnostics is the idea of the divine spark. We hear a lot of that now too. They say the Gnostics were telling us that we're on a prison planet and we have this divine spark and we need to activate our divine spark and escape this planet. Well, Gail, actually, honestly, to tell you the truth, well, I'm always going to be honest, so I'll to tell you the truth.
Okay. Yeah, tell me, because I believed in the
when you realize that Sophia created us and brought us here and set up a habitat for us, the last thing on earth we should be doing is leaving. But ever since she created the archons, which were an anomalous, accidental occurrence, she had to deal with them too, and they're like our cousins, and she could have taken them out. She was powerful enough in the early stages where she could have said, "Whoops, a fetal error. This thing is out of control. I'm just going to delete it." But she didn't. She allowed them to, because of free will. She allowed the experiment to proceed. And as it turns out, the archons are becoming our biggest test, because the archons are kind of what has been interfering with the fulfillment of the divine experiment, humanity, so that which has been blocking us from blossoming. So the goal here is not to escape this planet. The goal here is to take this planet back from the archons.
Take our power back.
I'm so frustrated by watching what's going on in the blogosphere. There's all this like simulation and I know I respect David Icke. I love the guy. He's done more than probably anybody to kind of wake people up. Yeah. But his new book, I'm sorry, he's totally off base. This is not, we don't live in a simulation. yes, we believe aspects of simulated reality, which is imposed on us by these archons, but that's the extent of it. In fact, we can shake it off. The thing is, the problem with people that are into simulation theories, they think that's all there is. And I always ask these two questions. Well, what the definition of a simulation is, right? It's a copy of what? What is the simulation a copy of? There has to be an original. Right. Who's talking about the original? Nobody. And
we
even
haven't gotten there yet.
I heard him once in an interview that he was on with John Nolan speak out the original, one word, one sentence about, oh yeah, let's get to the original. Well, I mean, guess what? The Gnostics, they described the original for us 4,000 years ago. So we know what the original is, and we know what a simulation is. In fact, there is a Coptic word, because the old scriptures that the Nag Hammadis are written into were written in Greek and Coptic language. Coptic language is similar to Greek. It borrows every four letters. After every four letters, there's a Coptic letter, right? So it's literally it's like the Greek alphabet, but it has variations. And there's a word in the Coptic alphabet that is describing simulation. It's called Hal. And Hal is what the Gnostics described as what the archons are using. They're using simulation to try and capture humanity because they're jealous of us. They can't get into our biosphere. It's impossible. They cannot do it. They've tried, and there's stories about that too, and they're even in the Bible, except they've been contorted and misconstrued. But when you go to these source documents, you can kind of clear the fog away and you get to the real root of this story. And these archons are there to try and block us. And they're a mimetic species. They discovered, because they were never intended, but because Sophia it's called the rift, like she rifted into the matter. Like if you can imagine, throwing a swimming pool into a desert, and the water hits the sand, right? What happens? You get water with elements of life touching the sand everywhere, and little bits of the encoded information of her was in that material, and it got strafed off on the archons, but that didn't give them 100% of the code, just enough for them to have consciousness and to be able to sort of organize themselves outside of the experiment. The rest of the story is all about the experiment that we're together with Sophia. And that's where it's leading us right now. So, that's because, and so once they realized that, and once they set up this whole other system, their full, attention went to try and block us, stop us, interfere with us, mislead us. If they can't get into our world, they want to figure out how they can lead us into theirs. And that's kind of what's going on with artificial intelligence. So that's the real kind of nutshell of the background story of the first part of the webinar, actually.
Where do the archons come in when it comes to the Bible stories?
They don't talk about them. They ignore them. They only talk about, well, actually, it's funny because a lot of people try to say Lucifer or Satan is the archons, right? But unfortunately, the word Lucifer only comes in the Bible once, and it has nothing to do with Satan. And the satanic element is actually a word that's more of a verb. Satan or satanic means more the adversary. So there's no being like with horns and all this stuff. I mean, all this stuff is like mythology, which came along later and is throwing people off track. So no, none of this archonic story. In fact, that's what's so amazing about the Nag Hammadi as well. Like, I'm like, wow, man, they had all these amazing books that were, bleeding over into some of the material that made it into the final edition of the Bible. But there was all this other stuff about the archons, and no one was touching it. John touched it, and John worked on it for 30 years and reconstructed the narrative for us so we can get our hands on it. And it's just incredible and it makes total sense, of course, right? If you look at the world.
Would they be what some people call demons? Would that be considered the same as the archons?
Yes, well, they make their appearance in our minds in a demonic form, and they can use our imagination against us. So if we are believers in demons, they can appear as demons. But one of the things that is in the Coptic script about the archons is they have two forms. One of them is they look kind of like an aborted fetus, like a large head, big bulbous eyes, skinny, frail body. matching almost identical to what people describe the Greys as.
Yeah, that sounds like an ET
Right.
Gray.
And the other being is their Dracon, is their head, their leader, and he's reptilian. So there's a reptilian master species that is in command of these drone-like, ET-like, Greys, and those are the two forms that were described in the Gnostic script. But since humans have this amazing thing called an imagination, and there's a word for it in the Coptic script, it's called nous, which is our divine intelligence. If we are uninitiated to the true story of what's going on around us, we will, of course, use our imagination to tap into the field around us. And I talk about that in my webinar with Inner Looking Glass. We have organs and hardware in our bodies that can tap into fields outside of, like in non-local space, outside of the matter around us in these fields. And that's also where the archons overlap into. And there they can very well tune in and tap into our mind waves and start influencing what we believe and what we think. And there's even a story of how they basically hacked into the human mind. And they hacked into the mind about 1850 BC. And that's also talked about in my webinar. Once they were inside the human mind, literally they didn't have to be living on the planet, because every single person that they could co-opt they actually do this through the neural network of the dopamine circuits of the human brain. I know it sounds wild, but there's science to back this up, Gail. They actually hacked into these neural networks of the human brains. And every time they successfully do that, and they use authoritarian structures, belief systems, religions, etc., and they use the reward punishment system of the human body to literally co-opt human beings here living on the planet. And the more of them they successfully co-opt, the more they can actually make their presence and spread out their ideology here on the planet, which is going to block us from doing what we're supposed to be doing here on the planet, which is to remember why we came here, and to reconnect with our mother Sophia Gaia, right? And so instead, what are we doing? We're developing artificial intelligence. We're getting locked into the narcissistic pursuit of egotism. We're getting deeper and deeper into material world and ego-driven concepts and structures. And that's exactly the transhumanist timeline. And I think the first time you and I ever connected was when I was talking about the Looking Glass project and timelines. Yeah. And here is exactly the two timelines that I've been describing, except I was able to revisit all of that now with respect to the Gnostic material. It fits perfectly. So here we have these two timelines: the transhumanist agenda, which is the archontic agenda, and the natural biological timeline, which is the fulfillment of the intended purpose of the anthropic genome of humanity.
So what actually was the purpose of humanity?
Well, the purpose for us is to blossom into the full capabilities that we've been endowed with, to have the absolute realization of all our full faculties, which are even, to some degree, we see some of the people that have paranormal abilities, that have psychic abilities, psi abilities. They are touching aspects of, which are built into our genome. We have telepathy, for example. We also have empathy, and we have, we have elements like we're the crown jewel of the anthropic experiment, but we're not better than any of the other animals within the anthropic experiment. We're just the human animal. All the other animals are to be respected, and we're actually supposed to learn to live in harmony with those animals and the biosphere of the planet to reach the fullest potential of what we can do. And of course, once we've done that, we've managed it, then the universe is open to anything possible. We could be venturing out into the stars, maybe connecting with other anthropic experiments and maybe other galaxies. Who knows, right? But right now, we have problems on our Earth to try and get in touch and to fix this archontic intrusion. And so you could look at the archons as not our punishment, but more, you could say, as our lesson. Something we need to learn to overcome. We need to learn to overcome the archons using the nous, this imaginative, divine, creative ability that we have. And so in that sense, they're our greatest test. And of course, it's cruel what's going on, because when Sophia and her partner Thelete designed the Anthropos, they didn't design it to deal with archons, because nobody anticipated Sophia leaving the Pleroma. So they didn't expect there would be archons, and archons came about as a result of as an anomaly, and it's even written into the material as well. So this anomaly is putting us to the test, and it's putting everyone to the test. But of course, they say if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So I think this is the ultimate lesson here, so that we don't look at archons as like just pure evil. What they're trying to do is incite us to error. And that error is subject to something else which comes up, because you realize that the Gnostics didn't believe in an evil force in the universe. They didn't believe in inherent evil energies. They only believed in error. An error that goes uncorrected and festers then turns into evil. So, this is what's going on the planet. There's all these errors. And so this, of course, led me to bringing into this material into the idea of a historical narrative. Because what is a historical narrative that's not true? It's an error. It's a huge,
our whole history
error,
is one big error, isn't it?
Right. History is one big error. And
we've been bathed in lies for generations.
We've been lied to. We've been manipulated. So these archontic energies have invaded a lot of people talk about like the invasion of the planet, from extraterrestrials, right? All you have to do is think back on the archons and realize that all the people that are sitting there on your mainstream screen telling you the lies from the mainstream, pedestal, and all those politicians that are carrying out the agenda of Klaus Schwab and the transhumanists, that qualifies in my book as the alien invasion, because they're literally co-opted, running on the program that is external. That's an extraterrestrial alien program. And so this is what's going on. We actually have to, we're looking out there for disclosure to happen. I know all about that because I'm directly involved with those people. But we're looking out there for it. And we're not even realizing, because we don't understand this home story, that we've already been invaded by this alien force.
Yes.
And they're prevalent all around us. And, and the longer we carry on the way we're doing, the longer and the wider their network is going to spread, and their penetration is going to spread over this entire planet. And so this is, what's coming down to it's the showdown, Gail. It's the showdown.
That's amazing. And, that's something that I heard Carrie Cassie said. We've already been invaded. And this has been some time ago, and they have been directly responsible for a lot of the I hate to get into religious dogma because people are so easily offended, but they need to know the truth.
Well, right. I mean, you've seen that explode on the net lately about religions, right?
Right. That makes it difficult to talk about because people don't want to open their mind to at least hear it. Why don't you hear it? See if it resonates instead of blocking it before you even hear anything.
Yeah, I know. And the thing is, we've been so we've been, because when you're a baby and you grow up in the world, you trust your parents, and then you trust by extension the authorities around you, the teachers and stuff, and you trust the principles, the dogmas of science and religion, and all these belief structures around you. But why do we have to trust them? Why can't we, why can't we doubt them? And why can't we have choice? In fact, the word heretic, which is what the Gnostics were judged, at the turn of the century, in the early few hundred years, as Christians as the Roman Catholic Church began to exercise its power globally through the Roman military might, literally they were put on trial and they were called heretics, And you know what the word heretic, the root of the word heretic is? To choose. So
you don't have a right to choose.
Right, so the right to choose, right? So someone's in there talking about Einstein. Einstein was a mathematician, but mathematics is a very tricky way to take something you can't explain, that doesn't have a resolution, and build your formula backwards from there. And then presto, you've got your mathematical formula that proves your theory. But there's so many theories, and the theory of relativity and the whole Big Bang theory and all of this stuff is mathematically built on simulations only and mathematical formulas. There's no evidence for any of it. In fact, Einstein's on record saying many times that there's no evidence for, and in fact, he was he was looking over his shoulder all the time because he knew as soon as someone smarter than him came along and saw through the charade, it was over for him. Fortunately for him, that never happened, and he's still considered man of the century on Time magazine, of course.
That tells you something right there.
Where you had a guy like Nikola Tesla dying, in poverty, essentially, right? Because why? Because he was an experimenter who had a laboratory, and he proved stuff by experiment. And he tried things, and lo and behold, they worked. And he worked his theories backwards from the evidence, not from some mathematical formula. And he had some, harsh things to say about people like Einstein and other mathematicians. And in fact, there's even a funny quote out there circling around where people asked Einstein, what does it feel like to be the smartest man in the world? And he said something like, I don't know, maybe you better go ask Nikola Tesla. So, and Nikola Tesla, what was he working on? He was working on electric universe, right? The planet is a giant electric circuit, and the electric circuit patches into the solar circuit, and the solar circuit patches into the cosmic circuit outside of it. Like it just keeps going. And it's really just this fractal way of building up the universe. And once we get past this whole relativity stuff and Big Bang stuff, and we can move into realizing there's consciousness in the universe, the whole universe is conscious, and we are just fractal elements of that great super consciousness, then we might start getting into some interesting areas, right? And I think even Nikola Tesla was saying it's all about frequency, right? It's all about vibration. He knew this, right? But he was way ahead of his time. Or you could say he was at a point in time where he probably wasn't ahead of his time because he obviously brought that stuff down. But he was at a time when there were certain bankers who were in the middle of trying to make a lot of money off of people, and it was easier for them to limit our expression, to limit our access, and put a tab on our electricity so that they could cash in on it instead of having it available freely for all of us, right? So this is the fork that we took in the 20th century. And then there was the fork that we took with respect to the narrative of the First and Second World Wars. And I break that narrative down so I would say convincingly. I'm going to say convincingly because it's not me telling you this stuff. It's not my theory. I'm telling you, I'm putting the information in front of you from the source, and I'm letting the sources tell you the truth. So you can make up your mind once and for all about what is true and realize that, hey, we've all been bamboozled. These narratives about the war have, all they've done is made a few people billionaires and billions of people dead. Literally, they've just wiped out so many people off this planet. It's just such a anti-life model. And this model has been kept alive through this archontic influence. So we need to recognize it, and we need to begin to call it out. So I understand there's people like Carrie Cassidy out there saying this about that. And there's a lot of people talking about aliens and having connections with aliens. Mm-hmm. But you got to realize, and you have to be careful if you're one of those people, you should really be questioning the source integrity of that information. I think there's a comment and someone put into the thing about how do you prevent yourself from being taken over, or how do you clear yourself from archontic invasion? And
good question. I didn't see it. Yeah.
This too is actually described directly in the Nag Hammadi. In fact, one of the Telestai teachers tells a Gnostic by the name of James, hey, James, okay, you're going to get confronted by these archons. And in particular, 3 of them are going to try and take you hostage. You're going to try it. In fact, they also take souls hostage. And they're going to say this and this and this to you. And every time they say this to you, you're to answer this way. That dialogue is there. It was there 2,000 years ago. Can you imagine, right? So they were obviously very aware of this dark force that was out there trying to abduct us. In a way, the abduction here we're talking about is to abduct our minds, right? So yes. If they can penetrate into your minds and they can abduct you, and one of the things that they were really famous for, with the reason the word hell and what it really means is, if they can make you believe that they have changed you, that they've genetically modified you, if they can make you believe in their structures and you believe it, well, guess what? It's as good as being genetically modified, because your mind has been hacked. You've been taken over. And this is also the way out, right? Because a lot of people think that we've been hacked genetically and that we're a slave species. and that we've, our DNA has been sniffed,
Junk
and we only
DNA,
have
they call
two.
it.
Yeah, but this is all another bogus narrative, as it turns out. And I'm sorry to break these news to people who are invested in all these things. I had to go through it myself. So when you want the truth, you go to the Quelle, as they say in Germany.
Take it a step higher. Okay, let's go.
Source materials, right? I mean, look, the Sumerian cuneiform tablets are said to be the first written form of the history of humanity, and they are apparently where they documented that there were these kingly lions, and they came to Earth, the Anunnaki, and they made a slave race so that we would mine gold for them. And out of this slave race came kingly lions, and it evolved from there. Well, guess what? The Sumerian tablets and these narratives were totally debunked by the Gnostics. They came in later and they debunked it, and they looked at it. They debunked it through reason, scientific evidence, and just basically looking at the real story. And they came up with they realized that the writers, the authors of the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, which, by the way, nobody can put a name to, but you can be sure who those authors were. They were scribes in the court of the kings of the time back then. And what are the scribes of the king going to write in those tablets? Oh, the king is nothing and he didn't come. No, they're going to make themselves into this superior race, and all the others are going to be their slaves because they can maintain what's called the slave species narrative, right? So this is a narrative which is in all of the Abrahamic religions, right? It's in Judea because there it's the worst, because there's a chosen people.
They're the chosen.
Right? Yeah. They're the chosen, and the rest of the Goyim, right? They're the people that are like their slaves when the Messiah comes, right? And then there's the Christian version of it where they have, the what do they call that? The rapture, where those that are great and good, they're gonna get raptured. They're gonna end up partying in heaven, right? And all the other sinners are gonna go and rot in hell forever, right? So nice creator there too, by the way. And then there's the Islamic story as well, where they're exerting punishment upon their non-conformist or non-worthy adversaries on the planet. And that's why you have all these like jihads and all these infidels wars going on around the planet. Right there, this is the seed. Those three right there are the seed of such violence and misconstrual you can't imagine. And this beautiful information left behind by us, little teeny fragments out of a library of thousands or millions of books, just these 13 books have in them the code that cracks that all out of into perspective, let's say.
Wow. Did you see the question Mathis is asking, Frank, are these archons part of the soul trap setting us back to keep being fed upon the loosh thing?
Yeah, I'm still working on that one, but it's interesting if you look at us as plasma, and we are active. We are like glowing plasma. That's why we see each other. In fact, the Sophianic, the narrative and the Gnostics called it the organic light. It's the real, it's the life force light that if you look at our cells under a dark field microscope, you see this light emanating from us. We have this life force light. That's different from the light coming at us from the energy of the universe that's reflecting off planetary bodies or from the sun, right? That's a different form of light. I'm talking about the organic light. And so this is part of our plasmic energy. And one thing that's really interesting, if you're looking into Robert Temple's work, you realize that if we are, as living beings, it's all about, it's all happening in matter, like it happens in the physical, in the flesh. What we have here's your chance to make it count. And what happens is when your body decays and you leave and you end up leaving your body and dying, whatever you want to call it, you don't just disappear. What happens is your body enters into a different state of plasmic existence. You go into a different frequency of plasma. You go into the invisible state of plasma. But you apparently, and I'm still investigating this, but you still have a sort of latent consciousness. You are still aware. In fact, there's descriptions of it in terms of like if you could think of your ancestors and all the people that have lived on this planet as being all around us, just like wallpaper in a way, observing and feeling and energy, like they're part of this energy in this field around us, but they're not active. We are alive. We're living in matter, and we're the ones that are the actors. So that's another reason to make this life count. Right? Because if you leave this life and you go back into that dormant state, you'll have to likely wait again a long time before circumstances and whatever state you're in develop the energetic crux moment where you pop back into a vibrant and living state of plasma. And that whole mechanism, I'm still working on it, but the archons, I don't believe I don't believe they feed off of us in that state, but apparently they steal souls. So yeah, there's something going on here. And like I'm saying, I'm still kind of piecing this together, but so far, I mean, this construct, it seems to me the one that makes the most sense.
The one from the Sophia.
From the Nag Hammadi writing. Yeah, exactly.
And that's where that whole story comes from about Sophia.
Well, they one of the things that they talk about in that moment where James is being, instructed on how to deal with the archons attacking him is to say that you come from the source, from the divine source, and you're going to return to the source. And so these are the kind of things that you have to know about. And Gnostics, again, means to know, right? So if you know that you're from the source, and you know that you have an intimate bond with Sophia, who is the planetary mother body, you are, again, in that sense alone, you are already protected because you're part of that energy. And so they cannot touch that. In fact, they go away. And this is how they got them to go away, when you remind the archons of who you are and that you come from the source that pre-existed matter, right? You're from the pre-existent source. And so if you hold those words dear and you learn those words and you understand that concept, no archon will ever do you anything, and you won't go into whatever experience you end up in. The ones that are talking about the light tunnels, don't go in the light tunnel or whatever. I think that you can sidestep that whole experience if you make this connection with our planetary Earth Mother.
So you're saying that you would say you're confronted by you would say you're part of source. Is that what you're?
Yes, you're part of the primal source of life. Yeah, you're the source that pre-existed the matter, the life. You came from the source, but you're also here, part of this planet. So you draw your energy from the planet. This is where we get our power. We get our power from our mother Earth, Sophianic energy, this organic light. That's where we get our power from. We don't get it from out there, and we're not going to get it by. And that was the other thing, the other second thing that I had that was irritating me about simulation, about getting away from here. Like, okay, well, where are you going to go? Like, first of all, what's a simulation a copy of? What's the original? Let's hear about it. Describe it for us. And secondly, if you're trying to escape from here, from the simulation, where are you going to escape to?
I would assume they would escape to the original.
Well, yeah, but if you don't even know what that original looks like, who's talking about that? And these people and these circles of people that are talking about the simulation, they talk in circles. The thing is, we already know what the source looks like. In fact, we are the source. We are it. We are reality. There is no simulation unless we adopt the archontic implant brain hacks that they've put into us. We are reality. This is it.
Brain hack. That's good. I like that. That's so true. Interesting. So
exactly, like Matthew says, demand to be taken to source, and they have to comply. They have to. They can't mess with you if you know who you are. Yeah, and that's what it's all about here. But anyway, that's just like we've gotten off on a tangent here, but I think it's an interesting one. It has to do with, I'm looking at the narrative of the historical narrative in part 3 of the course, which is really what it is. It's kind of like a master class. It's 7.5 hours. So it takes you through the cosmology and explains to you how it works and makes it sensical on a lay person's level, I believe. And then, the second part goes into more, who are the archons, who are the Gnostics, and how does this ideology of master race ideology, where did it come from, and who on this planet is practicing master race ideology? And I give you some pretty clear examples of those who are representing the master race ideology on this planet to this very day. And then in part 3, I then go back and I analyze something called the Polish white papers, which were found by the Germans when they came into Poland at the beginning, when the hostilities commenced in 1939. And these papers made it very clear that the Americans were infiltrated and were driven to push the Germans into a war. And this is a narrative which is going to be very hard for most people to swallow. But I know that I have to be very careful about it. But I do it in a very, I believe, responsible way, in a way that kind of makes it clear to people. First of all, we look at the material. We look at those diplomatic correspondences between, the Polish ambassador and his country, which are no nonsense, like really just diary entries. That this is what happened today. This is a discussion I had with so-and-so. This is the meeting we had. This is what's going on right now in the United States. This is what's coming out in the press, and a direct communication back to headquarters on what's going on that is preempting the war by, years. Okay. And it makes it very clear that what happened is when the Germans published those papers, they were considered to be fake news. And of course, the evil Nazis.
Anytime it's truth. Yeah.
So the evil Nazis, right? So that narrative has been enforced to this very day. Every single film that's out there now, you could almost say without exception, okay? If it's a comedy, if it's an action, if it's a drama, I could put money on it that you'll find a line in the film somewhere about the evil Nazis, right? Or that particular allusion to what took place in, Europe in the Second World War. And, when you have this information now out there to compare that to, you realize that, wait a minute. What if that narrative isn't really 100% true? What does that mean? And so it's going to kibosh that. I mean, I believe, like, I'm a very firm believer that we have to fix our problems here. We can't wait for the extraterrestrials to land. Jesus ain't going to come and save us. There is no Jehovah in the sky that's going to come, and there's not going to be a day of judgment. All the bad people are going to be put away. No, we have the responsibility to do it because the information for our liberation has been made available to us. And like I said, the interesting coincidence in the 70s with the appearance of the Nag Hammadi translations in English, right? And then the Gaia theory. Well, it was preceded by something in 1947. Because the Nag Hammadi was found in 1945, but it wasn't until 2 years later that they actually figured out what the heck they actually had their hands on. Right? They didn't they're dormant. Nobody knew what it was, and nobody did anything with it. And then suddenly in 1947, right, you had the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, another group of documents which were written by an extreme radical sect called the Tzaddikim, who resided around the Dead Sea. And they were the ones that were putting together this document of righteousness, right? The Melchizedek, right? Because, well, the word Melchizedek, it has Zadik right into it, built right in. Zadik, right? Melchizedek, right? So Zadik is built into the Melchizedek who came and gave Abraham you're going to be our chosen dude, man. Just, follow our agenda and you're all good to go. We'll give you a good prize at the end. Everyone else get thrown to hell, and you'll be living in paradise. And, remember the dopamine circuits of the human reward system, right? The human neural network. So this is what comes out in the Dead Sea Scrolls right at the same time, 47. And so you had the Nag Hammadi, which was the antidote to the Dead Sea Scroll master race ideology, coming out at the same year. You had the setting up and recognition of the state of Israel, which is you could say the seat or the home ground of those who are considered to be God's chosen, right? And then you had the Roswell crash, where they, for the first time, had penetration physically into the physical world of I would be, hard pressed not to call them archons, because they fit the description left behind for us by the Telesti, the Gnostic scholars 2,000 years older. They described them to a T. And they couldn't live within the bubble of the biosphere for long periods of time. They can only penetrate briefly, and then they're back out. Well, who fits that qualification? Well, if you know my Tale of Two Timelines webinar, you'll realize that I went deep into the Dan Burrish story. And what did Dan Burrish do? He went and talked to one of the J-Rods who looked like the Archons. And how could he meet with the Archon if the J-Rod isn't able to stay, right? Well, they created something called a clean sphere, which was a bubble which had a, almost space-like temperature and low oxygen. No human would be able to survive in, for this being to be able to stay here on the planet and communicate with us. So here was a direct physical penetration of something which began and set in motion what we call now the breakaway civilization. All of it happening in 1947, Gail.
Wow.
Right. So this is where I'm going with all this. It's like I'm piecing it together, and my webinars, I'm putting it out in the form of the webinars because it's the only place I can really put this information out, because it's so it's so explosive. But it's true. Like, I mean, I put it out there without any kind of filter. I don't try to filter it, or I don't try to warp your mind in a certain direction. I'm just giving you the facts as I'm finding them. And we go along, and we if we have to go back and re-look at something earlier, then we'll do that in future webinars to try and it's all about getting to the bottom of the truth and fixing the situation here, not escaping this situation. This is the big discrepancy I have with all those people out there that are saying we need to get the hell out of here. No, we need to get the hell in here. And we need to take this planet back, because this is our this is our heaven. Okay? Just get real. This is heaven. This is our heaven. You want to get in touch with Sophia? Go out in nature and look at the trees and the deer and the animals and the birds, and listen to the sounds of nature, and realize what you're listening and what you're taking in is the body, the clothing, the essentially the essence of Sophia right there. And you can have a direct and intimate communication with that being. And in fact, that being is actually making efforts now to make communication with the world as well, and having an impact on the timeline from her level of being. But that's a whole other story.
Oh, wow. I want to hear that story too.
Everyone wants to hear that story. Yeah, I did a workshop on the weekend. Everyone's like, "Oh, you want to have that as a workshop?" I'm like, "Okay, well, give me 6 months, right?"
That's fascinating. I mean, such great research.
Hitler wasn't half Rothschild, by the way. That's just an implant. Totally debunked. Not true.
What was
all
that?
of it. You can let go of that. It's myth. I mean, in myth in the negative sense, because myths can be true as well. But in this case, that was a myth deliberately implanted to give disinformation.
Which myth? So, I missed what you said. What are you talking about?
Someone put in there that Hitler was half Rothschild. This is all just, fantasy. All been debunked, and not just like through some theory. It's actually been debunked on paper. There's no evidence whatsoever that Hitler was half Rothschild. There's no evidence whatsoever that he was funded by Wall Street to go and start a war to take over the planet. This is all archontic fiction, my friends, and you'll have to deal with it at some point when you kind of go and figure that out. But if you take my my webinar, I will bring you a long way toward clearing up a lot of those misconceptions, and you will breathe easier, whether you're Goy or Jewish. It doesn't matter. These are burdens that have been put on our shoulder, and we need to shake them off, and we need to remember who we are, and we need to embrace each other as brothers and sisters with diverse multicultural expressions on an entire planet. And that's something beautiful. It's not something to get rid of. It's not something to go to war against. These are all archontic intrusions which are keeping us from realizing the paradise that we have here on the earth. No, Obama's not Hitler's grandson either. I love it. I love all these weird things, but they're not. They're just not. No.
It's all part of the narratives that they pushed in the dogma that they.
These are all false narratives that were put out there. I mean, there's really there's so much. There's all these different psyops that they've created. Disinfo psyops. There's world model psyops. There's false flag psyops. There's all these things that are out there that are intended to screw with our minds. And
they do a good job of that, don't they?
And we've gotten to a point now. No, Merkel, they're not related at all. Again, another fiction. But these are all things they're screwing with us. We've gotten to a point now in our history. We've been so messed with. It's like we've really been screwed with. Like, seriously, you almost have to be a genius to get past the mind F, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I know exactly.
Right? So I know these are all things that I think people are beginning to wake up to, and all I can look at is I'm trying to facilitate bringing that information out in the cleanest possible way, without any affiliation to any organization, without any religious affiliation. I just want the truth, the clean truth, because if I've been lied to, it pisses me off. And if I figure out where and how I've been lied to, I'm going to turn that information over to all of you, so you guys can figure out that you've been lied to as well, and we can shake off the lies together and learn what reality really is. Because a lot of us are not living in reality, not because we aren't real, but because we've adopted the simulation overscan, like let's just say, call it that, these simulated ideas of reality, right? But the archons can't make a pearl out of plastic. You know, they can't. But they can make us believe that plastic is a pearl if we go there, if we believe their mind programming. Do you understand the difference?
Mhm. Yeah. How are they able to do that so effectively is what they work through other people.
Through the neural hack into the dopamine circuit of our minds. And this is going back 2000 years, 1850 BC. Okay, how long is that? That's almost 4,000 years. That parasite has been, they used it through the abiogenesis, right, of the aphid. There's these nanoparticles that can get past the blood-brain barrier, and they get in, and it's called, another word for it is Toxoplasma gondii. And you can look that up, and you'll find that they even did experiments with mice who they infected with Toxoplasma gondii, and the mice would literally run into the mouths of the cats, you know, to their death, because they were literally being told to, right? And it's just because
that's like what they're doing to us.
This is exactly, and if you look at the Beetlejuice, right, and the jab, you know, really what we're talking about here is an updated version of the same technology they did 1850 BC, and now they're using it in a new form, and they're using it through the idea of mRNA messengers that get into our cells, that penetrate past the blood barrier, penetrate past the blood-brain barrier, and they implant into our cell a foreign program, a hack. And this hack is intended for us to believe that we've been genetically altered. And the interesting thing is that the Gnostics disavowed the concept that the Anunnaki changed us genetically. They proved that it wasn't true. And it has to do with us believing. If they can make us believe they've hacked us genetically, it's just as good as hacking us genetically. But the story of them trying to penetrate into Eve is actually written within the Bible, and it's written in the Gnostic text. In the Gnostic form of the text, it's of course the pure form, and it's a much more interesting story, and it has to do with the gender rift. And the gender rift ideology and mythology exists in the Greek mythology. It exists in the Bible. It exists in other forms of documents out there, but it's fragmented and it's not pieced together the way that the Gnostics had pieced it together. The gender rift has a very specific reason why it happened, and what led to the gender rift led to really a whole chapter of history that has to do with the Nephilim. But we don't have time to go into that today.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fascinating, though. I'd like to do another one to keep. You're just a wealth of information.
Well, yeah, my mind has been exploding, as you can imagine. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, you don't have to adopt the Archontic program. I'm the proof of it. I'm just, you know, I used my nous, my divine, creative, intelligent energy, to channel it into creative projects and to find out the truth and to align myself vibrationally and frequency wise with that information. And it comes. That's all I can say. And it's the same with Tanya. Both of us, we are, you know, we're part of that intentionality to get at that information, and it'll come to you. So you don't have, and it doesn't mean that you have to become lethargic and sick all the time. You get past that. I mean, I'm living in the same toxic sludge as you all are, right? Sure, I use clean slate, you know, and a couple of things to sort of help to, you know, and to fortify my body's own system to pull stuff out using, but I'm just giving its natural cleansing process more just an assistant, more help, more energy to be able to do that more efficiently. But I'm not actually replacing that system with any miracle device or frequency machine I wire up to my brain and now I'm clear of where, you know, in the end, we have to do it ourselves. Now, we've been given the ability to clean our brains out, to clean our minds out, clean our bodies out. So take power, take your power back, take responsibility for that. Learn, you know, like, you know, you've got a brain, you can learn how to sprout things. You know, we had on our last show, I talked about wheatgrass juice and living foods and all that, right? This is all part of it. There's information out there that teaches you how to detox your system from fluorides and glyphosates and aluminums and all this stuff and the mRNA stuff out there. We can pull it out of our systems. and we can resonate at a different frequency altogether, so it doesn't really have to affect us the same way it affects people who have accepted the mainstream normal program, the normies as they call them.
Yeah, well, that's a real problem. Well, truth has a frequency, and people usually can feel the truth when they actually hear it, if they're open to it. I guess sometimes the mind just closes down. Now, somebody asked this.
About this 12 strands being cut down
Yes,
to
yes,
2.
yes, yes.
I don't know. I think that sounds to me like a bit of a, I'm not convinced that narrative is true. You know, they discovered, they made a photography. They photographed the center of our galaxy, and you know what they saw? This will blow your mind. A double helix. They didn't see a 12-strand helix. They saw a double helix. Again, more evidence that we are definitely, that's where we came from. That's where our creators modeled us from. And so is it a big surprise that we found a double helix at the center of the galaxy? No. So if you believe in the double helix 12-strand myth, okay, until prove it, like do the research, prove it, find the evidence. But I'm telling you, I have not found any real evidence to support it. And in fact, if you believe that, if you tend to believe that you've been dumbed down, what are you going to act like in the world? You're going to believe that you're not going to be able to fulfill what you actually came here to do because you've been stunted down. You're missing 10 strands, right? Isn't that how you'd feel? So, if that's true, like you're convincing, be careful that you don't allow yourself to be convinced of some narrative, some new age guru on some chat and disclosure group told you that. Where did they get their information? Always double check that information and find out at least 2, if you can, or more sources to confirm what your research is telling you, because otherwise you're just doing confirmation bias, or you're just, worse yet, passing along a fake implant that somebody put out there that wants to keep us in the mindset that we are not everything that we were designed to be right now, that some Anunnakis came here and they snipped us. There is no evidence that Anunnakis came here. And it's interesting. I even read some paper of a group meeting in New York on a regular basis, and this is like a high level physicist, scientists group that they keep out of the private, almost like Gnostics in a way. And in this discussion they were having in 1992, they were discussing how they already can synthesize gold. They don't need to dig gold out of the ground. We can synthesize it. Humans figured out how to synthesize gold. Go figure, right? Now you're going to tell me that some advanced species of gods came here with Nibiru on a planet called Anunnaki, and they were too stupid to figure out how to synthesize gold, so they had to use us and actually go to all the trouble to genetically engineer human beings, which are created by a Sophianic entity, which probably 1 billion times more complex than they are, and in order to mine gold on this planet. I mean, you start looking at the narratives and you realize, man, I think a lot of people that impregnated these narratives into the stream are probably sitting back just laughing their asses off to see how dumb people really are to take these narratives at face value without doing any hardcore serious research to back them up. No offense to any of you out there who believe those things right now. Listen, I'm just as guilty, but I'm telling you, be careful.
Yeah, because I've had that too. So
Ishmael Perez is another one of those. Well, I won't say it. I don't need to say it. The work speaks for themselves. By their fruits you shall know them. Right? Ishmael Perez, I will say this, he can't even get the history of the planet Earth right. He ought to do my time capsule for the Future Past webinar, so he understands a little bit of the true history of planet Earth, and then maybe he can adapt his history of the entire galaxy and to sort of fit the truth or whatever.
Oh, that's fascinating. It is exciting to hear another version that doesn't fit what an official narrative is, because just even like the divine spark.
Yeah, that's a Talmudic lie. That came out of the Talmud. That isn't Gnostic. A lot of people say that's Gnostic. Well, the Gnostics said the divine spark. I hear it every day, even from people that are close.
Yeah, I do too. I thought
but
it was
it's not.
true.
The Gnostics never said divine spark. That's a Talmudic expression. That came from the Abrahamic religion, where they've already co-opted the narrative and they rewrote it. In fact, there's nothing original in any of the Old Testament. That information was stolen from all the different religions and sects that preceded it for centuries, for thousands of years. The only differences between the narrative in the Old Testament and what's in those old stories they plagiarized is the versions that they wrote into it, making them a chosen people. Well, isn't that
Yeah.
something?
Oh, isn't
Isn't
that,
it
yeah.
an interesting coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Come on, people, wake up. It's time. We're moving into the age of enlightenment. We're not going to move into the fifth dimension on another planet, on another place. We're going to do it right here.
Right
We've got
here.
it all around us. It's a luminous, living, vibrational, plasmic force that we're living. We're swimming in it. And we're alive. And those people who aren't, they're watching. They're missing out on all the good action.
This planet is beautiful.
The action is happening here in the physical, not anywhere else. Don't let anyone convince you of anything different.
What about longevity? Where does that come in?
Well, I mean, longevity is has to do with gene expression, right?
Right.
So first of all, if you have good genes, if you're meaning that if your forefathers and mothers were relatively healthy and didn't contaminate their systems, chances are you have a really good blueprint. And most of the problem that people have genetically now is not that their genes are corrupted, but that they're subject to something called epigenetics. And epigenetics is the proven science that shows that genes are not the expression, but it's the way the genes are, it's the culture medium that the genes are embedded in, which determine the expression of the gene. Okay, that's fancy words for saying if you put the gene into 3 different culture mediums, 3 different forms of like our culture medium in our bodies are blood. Okay, so if you take a cell out of your body and put it into a substance similar to the human blood, but you do 3 different variations of that, what happens is that you get 3 different expressions of the gene. In one petri dish, you'll have muscle tissues, and another one you'll have neuronal tissues, and another one you'll have fat cells, right? So that proves right there that we are not our genes. It's the gene expression. And what makes the cocktail in your blood? Because if it's the culture medium, and the culture medium determines the expression of your body, of your gene, of your building plan, of your DNA, who's the bartender for your blood? Do you know that? Your brain. That amazing biohardware I talk about between the pineal gland, the thalamus, the pituitary gland, the hippocampus, all these things are the determiner. They're the bartender that decides what your blood picture is going to look like. Now, if you are out there and you're seeing something which is scaring the bejeebies out of you, what's going to happen? Your brain is going to be signaled, oh my God, right? So your brain is what is it going to do? It's going to synthesize adrenaline fast as hell. And then your body's going to get filled with adrenaline. You're going to get pumped up and you're going to run, whatever it is, to get the hell out of there and get into safety, right? This is a fight or flight mechanism. But if you're living in the modern world and there's nothing to run from, dinosaurs aren't around, and there's, there's no army standing at your door, you're just scared because you're scared of whatever, emotionally scared, you're going to be concocting blood, which is going to make your body move into a fight or flight vibrational frequency. And so you won't be calm. You won't be at a place where when you meditate and you breathe deeply and you get into a higher state of consciousness, into a deeper connectivity with the frequency of the earth, guess what? Your blood chemistry is going to be totally different. It's going to be the kind of blood chemistry which opens you up to inspiration. So you choose. Do you want to have a cocktail that's like panic oriented, or do you want to have a cocktail that's calm? And the only way to have the calm cocktail is to see through the illusion out there, which I'm trying to bust in my way. So you can say,
You're
oh
doing
man,
a good job.
I used to believe all that crap. I can finally let that go. So now you've affected your gene expression. So you've moved your body into a better state of existence. So aging, I believe that if you can, clean out stuff out of your system, change the way you think, and move into a positive frequency, you can extend your life. Who knows? I don't even want to put a limit on it. There are people that are like 120 years old. There's some that are claimed even to be older, although they kind of look like fossilized humans. I'm not sure if I want to be like that. But who cares ultimately, right? Isn't it better that you have like a high frequency, high vibrational consciousness while you're here, while you still can have that? I mean, don't think about the future. Don't think about that. Just do whatever you can now in the moment to nourish and fortify the cocktail, the bartender of your body, to make your body the best expression possible. And the rest will take care of itself.
Very true. Tim has a question or a statement. Do you agree with it? I believe our soul is not tied down to our DNA, hence walk-ins.
Well, I've heard that the true expression of who we are is spirits, and that the soul is something that we take on to navigate the body and the physical only for a certain reason, for a certain duration. So I don't think that we are a soul. I think we borrow a soul. And this is interesting. If you look at it that way, there's a lot of people who have soul memory. They feel they were reincarnated and they can remember. And there's even, actual cases where people can go to the place that they used to live in, and they can identify their ex or even murder case scenes. And there is this kind of stuff going on. There's got to be some way to explain that. Okay. So I think that has to be connected to the idea that a soul is a borrowed frequency of consciousness, like a plasma cloud that you cannot see, that has a certain frequency and signature, and you tap into it and you use
like
it.
A personality almost, isn't it?
Like a personality. And that's, why doesn't everybody have the same personality?
Yeah.
Why are there some people that are born and can play Mozart at 4 without even having had a piano lesson? Excuse me. They're tapping into the plasmic cloud around us, and they are out there. There are plasmic clouds all around us, and they're super intelligent. Chitovich proved it. So let's just understand it, or let's just accept it. We'll figure out how it all works once we begin to accept these models and begin to experiment with these new ways of thinking and new models of thinking.
Wow.
So like things like, if you believe you were a person in the history, the vibration of those personalities is still programmed within the field. I talk a lot about the connection between the pineal gland and the field outside of local space, and that we actually have biohardware that uses the 8 hertz frequency to tap into the magnetosphere and the Schumann frequencies. So if this is a repository, as we had Michael Persinger, a neuroscientist, explain to us in our film Solar Revolution, that the entire magnetosphere of the world is like a giant. Well, what else is magnetic that you have sitting in front of you, right? Or at least the old one, the computer, right? A hard drive. It's a magneto drive. Why? Because magnets are a great way to store data. And so we've stored all this data out there for all time. There are some plasma clouds out there which are big enough to store the data to make up the entire planet's history 10 times over, and even in another universe, maybe. So you got to realize that this stuff is out there as potential for us to tap into. And that's why, these things are constructs. We can use them, but to get obsessed with, I was Cleopatra. There's some people that really go out of their way to write books and make all these claims about who they were. This is all fine and dandy. I think it's nice entertainment, but what are you doing with it is my question. Are you using it to connect with Mother Earth, Gaia Sophia, and to restore balance here and to rebuild the cosmic plan of our intention? Or are you just on an ego trip and you think it's cool that you were, Napoleon or whoever, fill in the blanks, and to justify the way you are? This is all, we've moved into an era of extreme narcissism, and the internet is a narcissist's dream. And all this technology around us is perfect for us to explore egoic, narcissistic ideology. They're not bringing us closer together.
Isn't it interesting? Whenever people want to look into who they've been in the past, reincarnated, it's always a queen or a king or some high position.
Oh yeah, sure, exactly. There's not only that, but it's interesting because if you go to the countries in the eastern part of the world, they will have visions not of Jesus, but they'll see embodiment of a being that corresponds to their religion, right? And so, there's a word for that called misoti. And then the Gnostics had this. They had this understanding of something called the misotis, and that's the shadow of the being. This is part of the creation story, which I don't have time to get into right now for all of it, but there is a corresponding shadow phantom energy that is around on this planet, which is there to communicate. It's a communication between the state of consciousness that you embody in your physical body and the higher realms of consciousness that are more connected with the Sophianic energy. They call that the misotis. And but you shouldn't, the thing is, it's not identifiable by, it's not Jesus in one country. And it's like, these are personifications that we've put on them, right? So we have to, I think, learn to let go of a religious construct and realize that we no longer need the crutch of religion. We don't no longer need the ideology and ethics of a religion. We can have ethics without religion. You can love thy neighbor without having a religious belief system. You don't, all these things are really just segregating us from each other.
And they were written by men.
And they were written by men. And that's all these Abrahamic religions are, all men, right?
It's
Mary's been relegated to a sinner, who was saved or whatever. And there's all these, mythologies out there. It's all man-based. Imagine this. Here you have a Sophianic narrative, mother planet with the name Sophia, who's this beautiful, luminous, divine goddess energy, a pleromic torrent from the center of our galaxy, who came here to give you a habitat. And all you're talking about is some guys, right? I mean, come on. It's funny. Even women are reluctant to embrace this because they've been
it's really indoctrinated
by the archontic male, ideology.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, that is so true. Where did you say the Sophia and Gaia? That was a connection there. What?
Yeah, the Gaia is there's the Gaia paradigm, which was James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis. She's a biochemist, and the two of them, or I think she's a microbiologist, and he's a chemist, and the two of them began to formulate something called the Gaia hypotheses, the Gaia paradigm, which shows that the Earth is a living organism, and that all of us on it contributed to its evolution, and that it's a continually evolving thing. And John Lash, who wrote the Not in His Image, which is highly recommended as a book, by the way, I cited in my webinar. You could do no wrong reading that. And he basically brings in the Gnostic element, which is the Gnostic person is Sophia, or the Gnostic personality. The identity of that being is Sophia. Right, and Sophia has morphed into the Greek word philosophia, right? I mean, it's found really all throughout the mythologies and cultures all around the planet. There's remnants of Sophia and the true mythology of Sophia in cultures all around the world, but they've been scattered and shattered by the invading army that literally came in and forced you under the threat of, decapitation to accept Jesus as your savior. And then a lot of people threw away, although it was hard with the pagans, they kept a lot of their stuff secretly, and still some of the pagan rituals have bled into the modern, practices like Christmas trees and the red, red and white mushrooms, and all these things have direct parallels to ancient, heretic, pagan, belief systems which were tuned into the Mother Earth.
Fascinating. Wow. So, boy, I don't even know what to add. It's mind-boggling, Frank, and I'm.
I kind of gave you a download, and I'm sorry for that. I realize.
Don't be sorry, please. That was awesome.
I've been kind of an unpersonable partner in conversation today, haven't I?
Oh no, I loved it. It was great. I learned a lot, and it's stuff to think about. And I definitely know I want to come to your webinar. Why don't you tell us what that
shows that we're doing, are going to be remnants, breadcrumbs for people in the future to find. And the reason I call it Time Capsule for the Future Past is because I realize some of the material is so far out that people may not be ready to adopt it yet. So bury it in the ground like they do with time capsules. You stick a bunch of stuff in it, intel, and then in 100 or 200 years, when maybe people are different or they've moved past limitations, they pull it out and they go, oh, look at this. Wow, somebody actually knew something. So that's why I kind of tongue-in-cheek gave it that name. Of course, it would please me if people checked it out now and they got it now. And they got into the work of John Lash as well. I think he's one of the most gifted teachers on our planet, and people have looked to everybody, to all these others, right? But man, I feel enriched by having connected with him, and I'm glad I was able to build elements of the Gnostic teachings into this new webinar, because they are the oldest source material we have with which we can look to for an authentic story of our prehistory. So why not use that? Why use channeled information, from whoever now, Grandpa or whatever? I mean, yeah, nice, they channeled information, but the Gnostic Magi's, they were doing that for thousands of years, and they set up whole systems to document that information meticulously, like scientists, so that they actually could draw it out and map it out and come up with solid, concise, provable material that they could pass along to the future, because Gnostics didn't believe in bloodlines. They believed in knowledge lines, believed in passing the knowledge, not passing the lineage, the bloodline. This is all
Wisdom
part of the
keepers.
slave-named species that the Anunnaki BS narrative that's been thrust on us keeps going and keeps going and going. It's like the Duracell commercials, right? It just keeps going and going, right? It's like that false narrative which everyone wants to believe because it sounds cool. Aliens came here and we were bred and we're slaves. How cool is that, right? No, I'm not a slave. Sorry, I'm done with that. And you're not a slave either, Gail.
Thank you. I'm not. I
and neither are any of the people listening today, if there's anybody still out there.
Yeah. Oh, there is. We got a number of questions too that
okay. Well, we could maybe do a couple of questions. I don't know.
We'll see. Well, what was this one? This sounds. Can your soul outpower another soul? Like my soul's kung fu is stronger than your soul's kung fu, and so none of your manifestations will work on me.
Oh, that's a weird question.
That is a weird question. I don't know what you mean. You might want to explain. That.
It's hard to figure out where she's coming from on that one. I think, the truest sense of knowing who you are and connecting with your source. We are humans. We are the human species, the anthropos. And we've been endowed with these divine abilities. And as such, we should start thinking of ourselves less as egos and more as the human species living through our bodies as a force of nature. And so in that sense, we're not here to live out our individual egoistic things, but we're here to bring down the anthropic ideology of genius potential and blossom into that. And the best way we can do that is to help each other. So the idea of competing with another soul doesn't even really have a place in that model.
Thank you. I hate competition. I always have. Some people say it makes people strive harder and do better, but it also defeats, discourages, and despairs other people. So it's I don't think it's cooperation is better than competition any day. But
well, that's one thing humans do that machines can't do. For example, a lot of people are like showing us that AI is amazing, and it is. Let's not forget it's a human invention. So of course it's going to be amazing. But if we don't use it ourselves, we're going to give it away to be used for by the archons. And so, one thing a machine can't do is, a machine is a sole player. And if a machine is hooked up to a network, what happens? The machines basically execute the same programs. They exchange the program until they come to the same place. But humans are special because humans are anomalous. And humans have something called novelty. We will come up with the goofiest, craziest ideas, and we will do that in teams. It'll be even more powerful. Little groups of humans putting themselves at a problem. It's amazing what comes out. It's something no machine will ever figure out. No machine would have ever done base jumping or, wingsuit flying. That's only something a crazy human will do. And they will go and solve the problem, the mathematics behind this wingsuit, and they will hurl themselves off of a cliff and they'll survive. A machine will probably never do that unless it had seen a YouTube video somewhere and it thought, okay, well, I could probably do that. But, because machines would have no reason to do it. This is what makes humans so special. We have these senses. Nobody can figure out what the heck they are. Like sensing, sense is something that machines will have a hard, even if they were to get to the place where we have robots around us and, we have all these servants, whatever they have these shows out there already that have, we're living together with these, human-like robots, right? Yeah. They will never be able to crack the senses. They will only maybe be able to develop an algorithm which emulates what it might be like if you had senses, but they won't be sensing. And one of the things I love that John said to me at the end of our interview, he said, the one distinguishing way you could boil it down to one sentence. Life is wet. Living is wet. And artificial intelligence isn't. It's dry. And you can't mix the two. And the only way life can only exist in something that's wet. We have wet, embryonic fluid. We have wet, you know, everything in our body is wet. When we come out of the womb, we're wet. Our brains are like a giant sponge soaking up water. We're wet. Wetness is life. Everything else is not life. And so machines will never be wet. They will never be alive. They will always emulate. And they might be clever at emulating, but humans can work together and they will surpass anything a computer can do. Because maybe a computer can think, you know, better on terms of like, what was that day that we met so-and-so and what year and where? And they'll have that data. And you may not because you've forgotten it, whatever. But maybe you don't need to carry that data. But if you're working in a group of people and you need to solve certain problems, well, you just put people in that group that know those answers. And then you have other people in the group that know answers to different things. And then what happens is you put them all together and a new energy field is created, a morphology which brings in those divine
morphogenic field, huh? Yeah.
Exactly, which brings in those endowments and will create something fantastic, something novel. And the aeons who created us, they don't have a plan. They don't have rules. They don't have the 10 laws of Noah or all this stuff. They have like novelty and free will, and they want to see where that experiment is gonna go. They don't want to be. It's no fun for them if they know exactly at a certain point. Oh, here comes. Okay, all right. Now reaching the end again. You know, no, it's boring, man. They want it novelty, just like we do. And the gods at the center of the pleroma, they have emotions and they have investments and stuff. They're not infallible. You know, that's otherwise there would be no novelty. There would be no free will. If everyone had a program and everyone followed the rules, there's just different levels of existence, different entities, far more complex, but we have a shadow of those abilities. That's why we are this amazing experiment here on the earth, which is heaven. Imagine that.
That's awesome.
Living in hell. I mean, it feels like hell, and I will agree that take a look at what happened in the last 3-4 years. I mean, God, you know, goddess, whatever.
Well, we believe so many negative
there is a lot of stuff out there. Let's not be in denial, right? Like that's kind of dumb too. It is a battlefield out there, and it's getting worse. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that, you know, I've been at these ideas probably for the better part of 30 or 40 years. Okay, I started thinking about metaphysics and reading metaphysical books, and you know, all these. I worked my way through different books and different ideologies and belief structures, and eventually, what happens is that I'm getting to the point now where you realize those same things are still kicking around, and they haven't gone anywhere. The same old crap, recycled, chewed up, and spit out again, and chewed up. And we've gotten to a point now where everyone senses it's getting crazy. We're reaching this crux point, and that old stuff just ain't cutting it anymore. And lo and behold, we have passed up the generations from 4,000 years ago, the actual key that our forefathers and sisters knew. And by the way, women were a big part of the Gnostic schools that were out there. So if people think it's just a guy thing, no, women were just as important. In fact, it even bled over into the Templar belief system that the value of a woman was 3 times that of a man. And I can show you the Templar diagrams that I found in the basement in a certain part of Europe that prove that, right? So, you know, this is actually a remnant of the idea that, you know, people used to, that women was sacred. You know, the whole idea of man and woman working together was a sacred thing. So I don't know how I got from that to, but anyway.
Yeah, well, because it's important, and what happened, you know, women have been subjugated in every area. I mean, there's, you know, token ones and token positions and things like that. And then they have the whole, and I don't even want to go there, but then we have the whole list of the women that were born men but are women now. That's a whole list, right? But anyway.
Yeah, why even go there?
Yeah, I don't want to go there. So anyway, why don't you give people your website?
Sure, yeah, that would be great. I mean, if you really want to check this out, I highly recommend it. It's not free, but it's not expensive. It's a very cheap course and masterclass in Gnostic teachings and World War II revisionist history. And the best place to get that intel is at cyberhive.tv. And if you forget that or you don't spell it right, if you can spell my name up on the screen, there it is, frankjacob.com. If you go there, you will find links at the top of that page directly to the webinars, to all those webinars, not just the time capsule, but also the others as well. But I highly recommend you check that out and do yourself a favor and pass along the information and get some others to do it. You know, if we can get 10,000 people to take that course, maybe we can make a dent. You know, so far it's only been a few hundred. So let's keep that going.
Oh, really? Because raise people's consciousness by raising, truthful information.
Absolutely.
What dates does that occur? When are you having the webinar?
Well, I put it live at the end of July, and I finished it at the end of the beginning of September. So it's now online permanently, so you can jump in anytime you want.
Oh, I thought it was coming up.
Well, it came out. I announced it in March, I believe, and then it took me April, May, June, July, 4 or so months to finish the first part. And I bit off more than I thought I could chew. So then, it took me a while to get all 3 parts up, because essentially part 3 is 2 parts. So it's 4 parts, but it's well worth it. It's lengthy, but I guarantee you won't be bored, and you don't have to watch it. You can binge watch it if you want, or you can spread it out. Like, maybe that was good that I let people have to wait, a month before they got the next installment. And people were writing me saying, when is it coming? It's going to be midnight in 15 minutes and stuff. It was really down to the minute for a lot of people. So yeah, people are liking it, and I'm really pleased with that. So yeah, I just want to be able to carry on doing that work. And the best way people can make sure that I can do that is to invest in my work. I don't ask for much. I don't, other than that, I don't like pitching people stuff. I don't like bombarding you with emails every day with a new thing that you got to do. I can't stand that kind of stuff. So if you sign up, I will send you occasionally in a mail to update you on something that's probably worth it. But I'm not going to be dumping emails on you. If you sign up for the newsletter, you probably find, damn, why isn't there every more news coming, right? No, I'm not like that. I'm trying to develop it, but I'm a one-man band together with Tanya Maidenford. We are like a small team, and it's difficult to get. We do the work of 5 or 6 people. So yeah, I don't have time to write emails constantly and be dumping Facebook posts and tweeting and Instagramming and all this stuff that people do these days. I just do what I can. I try to make it qualitative and get it out there.
And you do a great job of it, Frank. I love your work, and I am honored to have you on my show. And if we maybe can do this again, talking about some other things that we weren't able to cover today, because this is quite a...
Yeah, we can get into the whole transhumanist thing, some of the technological stuff, the evolution of the looking glass. That would be cool. We can talk about that.
Let's do that. We'll set something up for that. That would be great.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for having me on, Gail. It's been good to see you again, and I'm glad you're looking good, and keep up the good work.
Oh, same with you. I love having people on like you, because I'm here to learn too. I wished I had spent my whole life studying the metaphysical, but I was into nutrition, and that's full of lies too. So anyway, and you know about that as well. So I kind of left that behind, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. But anyway, it is up to us, and I hope people take your message to heart, because this is our real physical reality, and we're here, and we are very special creatures, and you need to take advantage of that fact.
Yeah, so, don't underestimate who you are. And yeah, thanks all of you out there in the chat room. I see that you're chiming out, and I appreciate you guys sticking around and being such a positive vibe for the whole chat. I noticed it's been great.
Yes, it has. And thank you everyone for listening. And again, thank you, Frank. And we'll be schedule another show and cover more material, because your information and material is awesome. I love it. And so do the listeners.
Thanks. And send me a link, and I'll post this on my channels as well when it's ready.
Okay, I sure will. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Bye,
Goddess bless. Goddess bless. That sounds great.
Yeah, Goddess bless. Yeah, it does. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
We have found our way. It's a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are, and like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers, stronger than ever. Never say never. Don't look back now. Don't look back now. Rise up, stand with each other. We are sisters and brothers, finding our place and running the race. We'll take our chance and seize the moment. Hold on tight and don't let go of all your hopes and dreams that light the way. We control our fate, destiny awaits. We are all the actors in the stories we create. Hope will be our guide. We'll no longer hide. When we roll like thunder, feel the wonder from inside. This is the time we form the chorus. Left your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our